Right here? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Is it on? We're just doing a little test here. Okay. So I could start off and say good day. Welcome to Australia for many of you. I call it the land of koalas, kangaroos, great wine, and terrific people. Because as most of you can tell, I'm not from Australia. I've had a chance to meet most of you, but for those who don't know you, my name is Val Peachy, and right now I am working for Charles Sturt University. I think it's a bit loud now, is it? Okay. I work at CSU. I'm the acting director for a unit called the Learning Online Unit and co-director of another unit called UImagine. So it's a pleasure for me to see so many of my colleagues from around the world in Great Port Macquarie, although it has been a little cloudy and the flight last night was an adventure for some of you, I understand. Just a few housekeeping details. First of all, the washrooms are out the door there and around to your right, and then they're on your left. There's an emergency evacuation gathering place up the stairs and in the parking lot. Hopefully we won't need that. There's also wardens that are around that can shepherd us if need be. Morning tea will be at 11. Lunch is at 1. Afternoon tea at 10 to 4. That being said, though, we've got coffee there, coffee and tea there all day. There's water on the table over by the side. So please make sure, for those of you who aren't from here, to stay hydrated, because you really find that with the heat, even though it's cloudy, you'll need a fair amount of water. Tonight for dinner, people are on their own. That being said, however, for anyone who would like to, we're opening up room 206 in the Macquarie Waters Boutique Hotel. So please feel free. I'd love to see a lot of you there just for a drink after the conference. It'd be wonderful. You can, it's sort of a no-host thing, but we have a few bottles of wine, and there's, you know, if you want to grab some wine and some hors d'oeuvres, that would be great. And if you want more details, you can talk to me during the day, because I'd love to see a lot of you there. And then you can go for dinner. Tomorrow night, of course, we've got the event at Ridges, the more sort of formal event at Ridges with the cash bar and hors d'oeuvres. Now, it's really a pleasure for me to introduce a great colleague, Professor Barney Delgarno. Barney is the acting Pro-Vice Chancellor for the Division of Learning and Teaching at CSU, and he's a terrific person and a wonderful colleague to work with as well. So Barney, it's a pleasure.
Now, I'm just looking at...
I think you have to stand here, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And you need the mic.
Yep, thank you very much. So look, thanks Val. And so I want to begin by just welcoming you to Charles Sturt University, echoing Val's comments. I believe this is the 7th meeting of OERu, and I think as OERu heads into its 10th year. CSU's been a member for nearly 5 years, and we have courses in the Indigenous Australian history and culture area within OERu. CSU's been providing distance education since our establishment in 1989, and through various other colleges that were merged to form the university well before that. We're the largest university provider of online education in Australia at the moment, with about 25,000 online students out of our total student base of, I think, about 42,000. So the majority of our students study fully online. We've got campuses across New South Wales. Our biggest campuses are in Wagga, Bathurst, Albury, But we've also got campuses in Dubbo, Canberra, Sydney, and a few other smaller places. Port Macquarie is our newest campus. Its first intake, I think, was about 4 years ago. This particular building and location of the campus is 2 to 3 years old. So you can see it's all quite new and very much in the growth phase. So we'll obviously be expanding further as our student numbers increase. Now, Port Macquarie is on the lands of the Biripi people. So the Biripi people are the traditional owners of these lands. And my main task is to introduce a welcome to country for us. Now, traditionally, Australia was divided up into, are we okay? Into about 500 different Indigenous nations. Or countries, as they're referred to. And traditionally, when a group of people from one country visited another, a welcome to country ceremony was performed in order to welcome people into the region. So I'd like to introduce Uncle Bill O'Brien. Uncle Bill is an elder of the Biripi people. Bill grew up in Sydney, but his traditional heritage is from the Biripi people, and he's moved back into the area and is a strong community member of that community. And Bill is going to perform a traditional welcome and then follow that up with some information about bush tucker, some of the traditional foods of the Biripi people. So over to you, Bill. Thank you very much. Well, thank you again, and I'll hand over to Val to bring us into our next session.
Okay. Thanks, Barney, and thank you again, Uncle Bill. It was really fascinating, because I think, gosh, when you're out and the weaving too, I did a basket weaving course with Auntie Betty in Wagga, and honestly, it's so much work. I couldn't, all day I did one little circle because I was very slow, and it takes an inordinate amount of effort that goes in. Yes, that's about what mine looked like after 8 hours, was this. So you can really appreciate the time and effort that goes into weaving. So thank you. Yeah, that was about it. So now it's a pleasure, though, for me to introduce our facilitator for the next 3 days, for those of you who are here on Friday, Wayne McIntosh, who is the director of the OERF, the Open Educational Resource Foundation. He's been instrumental in the work of the OERu, and he's also the UNESCO chair, or the UNESCO ICDE chair in OER. So, Wayne, it's now over to you.
Belle, thank you very much. Good morning, all. It's great to have you here, and welcome to so many friends who have been with us on the journey since the very beginning. We also welcome all our observers. As an open and transparent organization, we really welcome participation from all in shaping our futures. Of course, we'll love the observers a whole lot more if they decide to join our network, but you are most welcome to contribute and help shape our futures. We are generally very serious about widening access to educational opportunity worldwide by using open source materials. And we've come a long way, and it's all good. What I'd like to do is basically, the first day of the meeting is really focuses on what we have done and what we have achieved, and looking at improving our own operations, where the second day is more strategic, where we look towards the future in terms of what we're doing. So just roughly in terms of how the agenda is shaped. For folk who haven't been to an OERu meeting, it's also worthwhile having a look at our principles of engagement in terms of how we work. This morning's session is really trying to get everybody on the same page, because different folk, depending on their participation or observation, have a different perspective of where we are at and what we're doing. So we use this morning to basically share where we're at, what we've achieved, so that everyone is kind of on the same page as we move forward with our critical review process. and looking at how we improve our operations, if that makes sense. The other interesting piece, which you may or may not know, is we run an aggregated feed of contributions from either participants here in this meeting, which is kind of a bit of a back channel, or remote participants. And there are a number of ways in which you can engage in that feed if you want to. If you have your own Twitter account, you're most welcome to post via Twitter. And the hashtag we are using for the meeting is OERu18. So that's hash OERu18. And the technology on the back end is smart enough to go out and look at what's happening at Twitter. And if it finds a tweet with that hashtag, it will inject it into the feed. In most instances, because sometimes the Twitter API doesn't always speak nicely with our tools, but in most instances it will come through. The other option is on the actual meeting website. So our meeting website, if you haven't seen it yet, you'll find it on meetings.oeru.org. And on the main website, on the top of the screen, there towards the right, this is busy blocking the view there, so let me shut this down. There we go. On the top of the screen, you'll see a head graphic. You can't see it on this view here, but there's a head graphic. You can click on that and create an account on this site. And if you do that, you'll see here under the Engage menu option, there's an OERu feed link. There we go. So under Engage OERu feed, anybody that posts directly via this site, their notes will also be harvested on this feed. So you'll see Rajiv has already posted via Twitter. Using the hashtag, the feed has come through. So the interesting piece of all of this, and we'll have a look at this in a little more detail later on, this entire infrastructure, which of course is open source, is the technology we use in our distributed learning environments. So we are able to harvest interactions from learners across a variety of technologies on the internet and integrate them in this live feed on the site. So if you do want to have a play with the technology, you're most welcome to do so. So I just wanted to point that out. So getting back to the meeting agenda, let me go back to the main partners subpage there. The schedule summary. So this is if you're just wanting to find the structure of the meeting. From the schedule summary, we are in the setting the scene session. And scrolling down here, this is where we're at. So another feature of the meeting website is you'll see all sessions, if they have links or resources associated with that session, the links are provided here. So that's just useful to know. If you're wanting to find where the document is, you might be in a breakout session, you need the document, you'll find the links embedded in the agenda of the meeting website. And so we want to have a quick look at the principles of engagement. Yeah, this is just what I didn't want to happen. Do it this way. I guess the most important message is this gathering here it's not a conference. It is an implementation planning meeting. And how we work is we attempt to build first drafts of proposals for action for a number of items and priorities that were determined through a consultative meeting. And we'll have I'll show you where the meeting agenda comes from. So it's a planning session. And so we'll have breakouts throughout the meeting where we draw up first drafts of the proposals for action for a whole range of things we are trying to achieve, right? And that's the first draft being an open process. it's tweaked and refined as we start implementing. So just a couple of things to remember. We build on our decisions and work done to date. We have a transparent record of every meeting that the OERu has held since its inception. In fact, the recordings of all the meetings are there. So if you ever need to go back and check up on the history and what we've achieved and what we decided, all our meetings and our meeting notes are recorded transparently. So what we try and do is try and build on where we are at, as opposed to revisiting what we did in the past. A key feature of the OERu partner network is, of course, that our partner institutions retain decision-making autonomy over all aspects of engagement within the OERu. At a practical level, what that means is no institution is obligated to recognize credit transfer from another partner unless you choose to do so. What it means is if you are providing value-added services that are built on top of OERu courses, you are free to do so. And you have total autonomy in determining the pricing levels for those services. In that respect, our partners retain total decision-making autonomy over all aspects of engagement within the network. And I think that's important to know, because it is a misconception when I speak to people who aren't within the network. There is a misconception thinking that there has to be this unilateral credit transfer for every single course. It's not how the model works. We respect institutional autonomy. So that's an important piece. We're focusing on the decisions for our operational plan next year, 2019, right? And of course, looking to the future for our strategic plan. At this meeting, we will be discussing the strategic plan and proposing recommendations for the approval of the strategic plan, which then gets tabled at the CEO's meeting. Okay, so that's around that. Yeah, standard stuff. Presentations and monologues to a minimum. That's a good, tradition in the academy. And avoid unnecessary affirmations and agreements with what the previous speaker said. That makes good sense. Are there any questions at this point? Any questions? Uncertainties? Good. Right. So a little bit of background of where this all comes from. So every year before the meeting, we have an open consultation meeting to determine the agenda for this meeting. And because we're spread across 24 time zones, we arranged 2 webinar sessions or web conference sessions, one for Oceania and North America, and then we arranged another one for Europe and Africa, so that to accommodate all the time zones in these meetings. The draft ideas for the agenda are posted in a wiki. And if you're not familiar with the wiki, it's a piece of technology that enables anybody on the planet to be able to edit and make inputs to that document. So kind of what I'm saying is everybody within the network has an opportunity at any time to actually go into the wiki and say, hey, I'd like to add that point, or I think we should be doing this, or we should be doing that, if you're not familiar with the technology. Then we take that draft, and I can show you the actual record of that meeting. And I know a number of folk here were present at that consultation meeting. So you might have a déjà vu experience, because a number of the items that you recommended for inclusion in the agenda are in actual fact in the agenda. So that's how the process works. So basically what we did, those are the folk who joined us, the agenda of that actual meeting that we discussed, and then the proposal for the agenda. We did, discussed the proposals, and then recorded what everybody had to say, what their contributions were. We publish the notes of the meeting and then distribute them again, so everybody can go and have a look to make sure that it is a fair and reasonable summary of what we actually discussed. And inevitably, they have to be good and accurate summaries because we've got recordings of the meetings, which helps a lot. But of course, there's always interpretation and emphasis on that sort of thing. And there, you'll see here in terms of the meeting that we had, there were a couple of suggestions for inclusion in the agenda, and they have been shaped into the agenda. So the agenda you see for this meeting comes from the consultation meeting, if that makes sense. Right. So that's in terms of the agenda, where we came from. And now we're at the point of the meeting, just to make sure that I'm not jumping sessions here. Okay. We're now at that point where we can do the introductions. I'm very pleased that based on the agenda, we don't have to fully implement the 2-breath rule. So the 2-breath rule is usually at these meetings, it's very hard to estimate the time that you need for the introduction session. And depending on what happens with the introductions, because sometimes introductions can be longer than planned, you've got to build in a little bit of margin in case something goes wrong. So what we normally work with is a 2-breath rule for introductions, is where you say, "Hi, I'm Wayne McIntosh." Second breath, I love the OERu, and then we pass the mic around. But we don't have to do that today because we do have time to do a proper series of introductions of the folk that are here. So please, if you could just introduce yourself, your institution, what you do at your institution, and to share something about the OERu, what you find interesting, challenges, why you engage with open education, just so that we can get to know each other, if that's okay. And I'm going to be quite unilateral here, and I'm just going to start and hand the mic over to Adrian.
Thank you, Wayne. My name is Adrian Stagg from the University of Southern Queensland, where I am the Manager Open Educational Practice. And one of the things that I find most powerful about the OERu is just the strength of the network and the willingness of all of the members to lend a hand and help you out when you're in trouble.
Hi everyone, my name's Nerida Quatermass and I'm from QUT in Brisbane. I'm the University Copyright Officer. I'm based in the library. You might also be aware that QUT was Australia's first institutional affiliate of the Creative Commons network. So we have a big interest in open, perhaps open scholarship rather than open education, and that's why I'm here today.
Hi, I'm Chris Walsh. I'm the Academic Director of Victoria University. This is my first OER meeting, and VU has been a face-to-face university until this year. So we are trying to expand our footprint in this area of not only online, but also open educational resources. And I'm really inspired by the strategic plan of the OERu. So I'm excited to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Janet Rango from the University of Papua New Guinea Open College. I'm Associate Director Programs and Production. We have a great interest in OER and particularly with OERu. And yeah, I just love OER and I love to be in the space and I like the sharing culture. Thank you.
My name is Philip Ice. I'm Director of Learning Technologies at Charles Sturt University. I used to guide some of the activities at CSU around open education, and Val Peachy took over from there and I stepped back. So I missed one or two OERu meetings. But this is a great opportunity to catch up again. I'm very committed to open education, also in my private consulting work.
Thanks, Philip. As I said before, I'm Barney Delgado, Acting PVC Learning and Teaching at CSU. I've been researching in educational technology and online learning for probably about 25 years. And I'm really interested in just this notion of unbundling of educational experiences and kind of new ways of packaging experiences together. And I guess the real challenges of delivering a cohesive quality experience for students where their experience can be made up of a whole range of different things. And obviously OERu performs, has a great set of kind of product in that space, and is a great platform that is, has the potential to kind of really contribute to that sort of notion of the new world of online education, I guess. Where we go, round this way.
Hi, I'm Mike Looney. I'm the program coordinator for Faculty of Arts and Open Learning at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, Canada. This is my first OERu meeting. I'm new to all of this, but I'm not new to open education. I started my career, well, I didn't start my career, but I 15 years ago was hired at BC's Open University, and we transitioned into Thompson Rivers University from there. So I relocated from Vancouver to Kamloops. And I've just been committed to open access education and open education all of my life. It benefited me personally, and it's great to be involved in that process. And my role at Thompson Rivers University is I liaise between our campus faculty and our open learning division, and build that relationship between the two divisions.
Hi, I'm Matt Dick with TRU as well. This is my second OERu meeting, so I'm happy to see a lot of familiar faces. It's a great time in beautiful Australia. And for me, what I find really interesting is talking about the strategy with everyone here about how we deliver this education across the globe and the challenges and creative ways to overcome those and think about that. And I think that's really fascinating because this is definitely, I see the future of where education needs to be.
Good morning, my name is Don Poirier. I am currently interim AVP OL with TRU. And before that, I headed up a small department that would engage with a number of communities. And personally, I've seen the power of openness. I've seen that the transformative power. And the thing that I appreciate about OERu is a structured and considered response to being responsive, which may seem kind of a conundrum. But I think that that's the next step. I think that we have to push the boundaries, and I appreciate the collegiality of the colleagues here. It helps, keeps us true, I suppose, and no pun intended with that one. Thank you.
White's Whitep, Christine Bovis-Knosson, Ines Quests, and Cook P to TRU. Good morning, everyone. I introduced myself in Secwepemcin, which is the traditional language of the Secwepemc people. Thompson Rivers University is located on the unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. I'm Christine Bovis-Knosson, interim president and vice chancellor at TRU. And on November 30th, I go back to being a pumpkin, which is being provost and vice president academic. I'm delighted to be here. This is my third meeting with OERu. And from my very first start in my career, where I developed with a team of people an open research methods course for the people in Scotland way back in the early 1990s that was paid for by the Scottish Office prior to the inception of the Scottish Parliament. To you today, what I appreciate about OERu and open education is making education accessible to everybody. And I think that that's a really important platform that we need to continue to push forward. Cook's Jam, thank you.
Hello, Rory McGrail. I'm the UNESCO Commonwealth of Learning International Council for Open and Distance Education Chair in OER. I'm at Athabasca University in Canada. Athabasca is Canada's open university. And my position is to support open educational resources institutionally, nationally, and internationally, particularly in developing countries.
Hi, my name is Alan Davis. Can you hear that? Okay. And it looks like, according to the schedule, I have about 30 minutes here. I'll tell you, I was born at an early age. I'm president and vice chancellor of Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Kwantlen is the indigenous peoples who still support us and from whom we take our name in the metropolitan Vancouver area. And we thank them for sharing their land and resources in friendship and in peace, along with the other First Nations in the region. I came to KPU with some advantage. I had the privilege of working both at the BC Open University, which became Thomson Rivers, at Athabasca University, which is Canada's Open University, at Empire State College, which is a radical alternative to serving adults. And so I came to KPU, which is a lockdown, rigid, curriculum-based, classroom-based institution, and started talking to them when I arrived about the other world, in fact, what I think is going to be the future of higher education, and increasingly important both for the people in our region and for people around the world. And so since we joined OERu when I was at Empire State, I guess I was president, and I said, we're joining OERu again. And we've joined in, and really is a bit of a Trojan horse to try and get various people thinking differently and rethinking the whole enterprise of teaching and learning. In fact, getting back to its roots and getting back to the core, which I think OERu does. Because the thing I like about OERu is that it kind of strips things down to the essential. It's very open, it's very transparent. They don't mess around. There's not huge bureaucracy. There's no rules unless they're important. And so it's very refreshing to engage with OERu and get right to the basics, which is to serve people and help educate people whatever their circumstances and wherever they are. And I'll ask my colleague Rajiv to introduce himself, but one of the great things that we managed to do over the last few years is to create a leadership, a role within the university in open education, and Rajiv can talk more about that.
Good morning, Phil Kerr. I'm the Chief Executive of Otago Polytechnic. We've been around from day one. It's been a long haul, and it's just really satisfying to see the point we've now reached. It's been a very, very slow burn, but as they say, the slowest burns are the hottest burns. I really think that we are, right on the cusp now of making a difference. I reflect on, what's come and gone in the open space, simply because it hadn't been carefully thought through, and partnerships had not been built. And I think that's what characterises this particular initiative. It's the solid partnerships that have held together, well, have been embraced actually over the years. Interestingly enough, I feel that there's more success for us with OER in the OERu collaborative space than there is within our own institution. This is the enduring challenge, the academic disease, is it not? If I haven't reinvented it, if I haven't built the wheel again all for myself, it can't possibly be a good wheel. Probably most others are in the same state where resources are never, ever going to be enough. And I live in hope. Wayne and myself and a couple of other key players at the Polytechnic in the process of having yet another go at embedding OER in the fabric of the institution. And I think what's going to make it work better this time round is the actual product that is now available through OERu, which we're linking into our own micro-credential service. So the learning in digital age is exactly what every single member of our community, our educational community at Otago needs. And we're intending to roll that out in the most positive and forceful way we can. And for us, sustainable practice is a critical part of who we are. And the sustainability micro courses, again, our intent is to embed those in every single program that we have as an elective, and then really encourage that uptake. After all, it's not going to cost anyone anything. And to boot, at least for our internal community, the assessment will all be for nothing. Oh, I probably rabbited on far too much.
Thanks, Bill. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rajiv Jhangiani. I serve as the Special Advisor to the Provost on Open Education at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. My background, though, before that is as a faculty member in the Department of Psychology, and it's been fun over the years developing courses. When I used to work at TRU Open Learning for TRU's OERu courses, and now, of course, overseeing this work at KPU. Alan mentioned the support at KPU. That's really been, I think, really a reflection of the tremendous grassroots interest in open education. KPU leads Canada in the creation, adaptation, and adoption of open educational resources. We, over the last year, have launched 2 credentials which students can earn without having to incur textbook costs, which is certainly a North American issue largely, but a significant one in terms of constraining student success. So it's been great to work to support all of that work on open educational resources, increasingly also work on open pedagogy. And as an educator, as a scholar, a lot of my work is on supporting open pedagogy within my institution and beyond. And increasingly working at the intersections of the open access, open science, and open education movements. So thrilled to be back. I think it's my 3rd meeting. I skipped one along the way. But really nice to see the progress over the last few years and over the next year. Looking forward to taking some of our courses through to completion as well.
Thanks. Hi there, my name's Steve Lindquist. I work as an academic developer at UTAS, or University of Tasmania. My basic interest in open education is that I've always published my teaching resources with Creative Commons licenses for, 15 years, I think. And where I'm really sort of working is working on award unit course, award course and unit design, but actually helping people to design units and courses in ways where there's actually then going to be a minimal amount of work involved to then actually repackage components of them as, OERu offerings or other kinds of OEP type entities.
Hi, my name's Rachel Fegan from the University of Tasmania. I work with Steve and Ryan. My main role at the University of Tasmania is in academic development, and my main interest is similar to Steve. It's looking at learning design as an enabler for micro-credentialing. We dipped our toe in the water this year and created our first micro-credential, which was pretty exciting. And we're now in the process of developing a series of micro-credentials for OERu. My first impression of OERu is, or was, that Wayne is a bit of a machine. Just incredible as far as the support and the responsiveness. And I guess the role that he has played in supporting us to build capacity at our institution has been a fantastic experience. So thanks, Wayne.
The UTAS consortium, or the syndicate. Well, most of you know that I'm Dal Peachy. And I've been involved with OERu since my time at TRU. So since almost the inception, since TRU was one of the founding partners, Wayne? So currently, though, at CSU, one of my roles has been to lead our Open Pathways initiative. And CSU is getting involved in, I'm not calling them MOOCs because we don't have massive enrollment. We're calling them tasters, and it's an opportunity to increase CSU's brand, to allow learners to come and try and have a taste of a subject or a mini subject at this point. It just has started. When do we start it, Barney? March, April this year. So we haven't been doing it for a long time. We're working with a platform called openlearning.com, and we've got 2 tasters up, and before the end of the year, we should have another 5 anyway. So it's a really exciting initiative. All the work is in the open, so there's been a lot of cultural shift required within the institution. But With respect to OERu, and some of you alluded to this before, under the leadership of Wayne and Otago Polytechnic, from my perspective, it's been amazing to see the number of credentials that are starting to evolve, the courses and subjects that have gone up in the time that OERu has been alive and well, and the engagement, the partner engagement that Wayne really does seek to achieve with all of the decisions and undertakings. And I guess the other thing too that I just want to not get lost in the conversation is around, we always talk about open education resources, but as Rajiv said too, there's the practice and scholarship of open, there's the philosophy of open. So the way we interpret open isn't only resources, but I think it's a much broader field, and the OERu, of course, is under the mandate of some social justice initiative too. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on OER and OERu especially.
Morning all, my name is Ryan Brunton. I'm the educational technologist at UTAS. I'm starting to feel like I should have sat over there so you could break us up. I guess from my perspective, similar to Barney, I'm really interested to see how the technology can sort of be decoupled and how we integrate these different systems to increase student accessibility. For me, I think technology plays a large role in us being able to reach those students that couldn't necessarily reach us. So it'll be interesting to see how that conversation develops. I suppose my perspective is far more operational to, I suppose, a lot of your roles. I'm one of the grunt work, putting in the time to get these courses up and running, and it's a really amazing learning curve. It's nice to see how these things can be stitched together, especially once the design has been done up front. So it'll be interesting to see how this sort of space evolves. Thank you.
Kia ora. I'm Simone Wood. I'm from Otago Polytechnic. I'm a fairly new member of their learning and teaching development team and an even newer member of the OERu team. Myself and a colleague, Claire Good, are seconded by the Polytechnic with Phil Kerr's blessing, making up for one FTE of a person to help develop some of the courses there. So Claire and I have been working the last 3 months on the Introduction to Entrepreneurship course. And that ties into the Polytechnic's EduBits, the micro-credentialing system. So we're developing the assessments that fit in with the EduBits system as well. I think my sort of particular interest is on the learner experience, and so two particular things that I'm interested in here are the work on quality standards, and also I really appreciate Wayne's focus on developing slowly. There's a great vision, but it's matched with a pragmatism which says you've got to go carefully on this. You know, I really like the emphasis on small-scale pilots, making sure the technology works, making sure that the learning design works for the learners in a very diverse set of situations that we probably can't even imagine the different situations that the learners are in, but we've got to have a go and work out how what we produce actually works for them in whatever country they're in, whatever situation they're in. So going slowly, having pilots is a really good approach, I think, so I'm interested to see that develop as well.
My name is Leslie Brooke. I'm also from Otago Polytechnic, which is in New Zealand, if you haven't worked that out from our accents yet. I'm new to OERu and I don't have an online learning background like most of you. My first impression is that this is something that the staff of our institution should be very proud of what we're doing. So I'm keen to see that, I guess, promotion of what we're doing and encouraging that amongst staff happen in our institution. I work in our research and postgraduate directorate, but I'm here with a wider brief, just looking at opportunities, not just ways that we can contribute to OERu, which is what Simone's doing, but also ways that we can benefit from OERu, including collaboration with and learning from the other partners represented here. So I'm already interested to hear about an open research methods course, and I'll be following up that one already. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Dave Lane from Christchurch in New Zealand. So I work with Wayne as the open source technologist at the OER Foundation. So one of the, I guess, helping to facilitate the OERu. And so Wayne and I are both full-time working on this project, although we only ever see each other in person at these international meetings because we live about 5 hours apart in New Zealand. I have a background not as an educator, but actually as a technologist. I've been doing open source software development for about 25 years, and it's something I'm very committed to. Ever since I was in kindergarten, it turned out I was reasonably good at sharing with my friends, and so I did well in kindergarten, and then I spent the rest of my educational career learning that it was wrong to share, and so I find it very, very refreshing to be back in an environment where actually sharing is encouraged and seen as a good thing. And I hope that the rest of us can all come to that party, because for me, it's very, very fulfilling to be in this kind of a role, because one of the few things in the world I think is undeniably good is helping everyone reach their educational potential. That can only have a good outcome, and it's one of the very few things that is like that in the world. I think everything else is colored by other sorts of downsides and upsides and downsides. And so I think for me, it's been very fulfilling to leave a world of building software for people that I didn't necessarily think were doing the right things with that software, into being able to focus my energies entirely on doing something I know is going to leave the world a better place. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Dave. I also want to acknowledge all the virtual participants. So one of the key features of the OERu meeting, as being an open and transparent organization, we welcome remote participation from anybody who's interested in contributing to shaping our futures. And so what we do with every meeting is we send out open invitations to, thus far we've had physical registration from about 50 folk from around the world who have said they are keen on popping in throughout the meeting and contributing. Now, obviously, working across time zones, there are a couple of challenges for the folk in Europe and Africa with Australian time. So one of the things that we do to accommodate those challenges is, for each of the breakout sessions in the meeting, there is a link to a collaborative Etherpad document. And so virtual participants have the opportunity of giving input into the breakout sessions asynchronously. And as long as those inputs are provided before the time in which we discuss feedback in plenary, that feedback from virtual participants will be injected into the meeting and will also be reported in the meeting summary. So I just wanted to alert that to the folk that are listening in at the moment. Unfortunately, the way our audio is set up in this venue, we are unable to take audio input remotely. It's a complicated story which I won't go into now. But I do want to acknowledge the folk who are with us and who joined us. If you do want to quickly introduce yourself in the chat channel, the remote participants, I will, David Porter is complaining about the fact that there's no audio input, it seems. And this is a challenge because David is a member of our board and he's not able to speak. But I'm sure he will make his voice heard via chat. I see Mark Macquarie is here from Dunedin. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're seeing some of the conversation going on there from David. But if anyone else is there, you want to say hi, please say so in chat. We will have a recording. The chat stream is also recorded, so we can make that part of the feedback as we move forward. But I do just want to acknowledge our remote participants. We are very serious about getting this right. And anybody in the world who wants to assist in helping OERu achieve what it's trying to achieve is free to do so. We are very serious about that. I also just want to mention temporary apologies. Professor Andy Van, who's Vice Chancellor here at Charles Sturt University and our host, will be here tomorrow. He had an important event that he couldn't get out of, and so he sends his apologies for today, but he will be with us tomorrow and on Friday. I also would, apologies from Clive Mulholland, who's Vice Chancellor at the University of the Highlands and Islands. He's in transit at the moment from some location in another part of the world, but Clive will be here tomorrow morning as well, so he sends his apologies for not being here today. And the other person I want to mention is Professor Helen Partridge from the University of Southern Queensland, who had some urgent business to attend to, but she has managed to rebook her flights, and she will be arriving at some either later this afternoon but definitely tomorrow, depending on how things pan out. So I just wanted to note those apologies. Yeah, okay. And I think that is pretty much everyone. So we've got a couple of minutes before I move on to giving a bit of the history. One of the areas I'm particularly interested in, and which is quite significant for the OERu, I mean, we spend a lot of time chatting about OERu and how we're going to achieve the OERu plans and how we're going to implement the OERu strategic planning. But within our respective institutions, there are a number of institutions that are doing things in the open space that are not necessarily related to OERu, and that's fine. The open philosophy is respecting freedom of choice. So this is not about why aren't you doing it with OERu. But I'm keen to hear a little about the kinds of things that some of our partner institutions are doing in the open space, but in particular lessons learned, and from your experiences of trying to implement and engage in open in your own environments. What lessons can be learned for OERu that we don't make those mistakes? Because I think one of the things that you've noticed, and I think it was picked up in some of the introductions, is the rigor of our planning. We spend a lot of time planning and thinking and figuring out how do you make credit transfer work for micro-credentials in a transnational credit environment. And put a registrar, a lawyer, and a vice chancellor in a room from 4 different institutions, and you'll have differences of opinion. So we do need to work through this process carefully. Initially, I thought it was quite trivial. We have this plan, we just, people move across the world and recognize this and it's easy. It turns out it's not that easy. And that is where we've spent the majority of our energy, is in sorting out how do we get this credit transfer to work in this environment. But we've sorted it. We have sorted it. And so it's a wheel that's available for anybody to reuse if they want to, but you're also free to reinvent your own wheels as well. As long as we get the credit transferred, that's a good thing. So I thought it would be good just to have 1 or 2 reflections. And I mean, I don't want to pick on people because I know there are things happening in open that are quite innovative. But so if anybody just wants to, can I be, because you're doing a bunch of stuff around open, Adrian?
Yep. Okay, so up at USQ, we've had a very long journey towards sort of implementing openness. And even now, one of the primary barriers that we have is both dealing with all of the stakeholders and the bureaucracy that entails, and things being fairly complicated in terms of raising awareness of OEP and OER. So even now, we've still got people who will, when you mention open educational resources, will immediately go to the idea of, well, it's obviously worth what you pay for it. So if it's free and someone's given it away, then it's very, very clear that that it's worthless. We are much better off producing our own material. The other one, of course, is the not created here syndrome, which is it wasn't made at our institution or wasn't made at an Australian institution. Hence, the context will be completely different and it will, again, be worthless. Much better off that we don't waste all that time recontextualizing. So let's actually build from the ground up. We're getting a bit of traction now, and it's the simple things I find. So recently, we joined the Open Textbook Network, and one of my colleagues, Tani Pierce from the library, attended their summit. One of the things that I asked her to do while she was over there was to collect up some of the OpenStax textbooks. And I have had more success in the last month since she's been back with academic staff looking at open textbooks and seriously considering them than I have in the last 2 years. Simply because when people say, okay, this is obviously poor quality, it's not going to do the job, etc., etc., I pull out something the size of a hardcover phone book. Seriously, the OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology book. If you've seen it, it's very impressive. I put that down in front of them and I say, that's an open textbook. That's completely free online. Have a look through it. And the number of staff who've looked through it and said to me, oh, that's actually comparable to one of our open texts, or people in that discipline looking through and saying, this covers all the stuff I'd expect it to. And then you say to them, well, okay, so it's free online. Flip the book over and check the price tag on the back because it's got the print on demand price, which was $50 US. The equivalent textbook for most Australian courses is between $185 and $220. And I said, that's $50 US as a print on demand. And the second one that I'd point out is starting to talk the language of senior leadership in higher education. And as much as it pains me to take on speak, which involves things like economic rationalization and neoliberal approaches to higher education and words like competitive marketplace, which make me want to go home and scrub out my mouth. But I find that becoming familiar with this kind of vocabulary, so sitting down as I did recently with our director of marketing, and I explained open resources to her, I explained what we could do, linked it to our student cohort. You've never seen a person more excited in your entire life when she suddenly said, well, wait a minute, why isn't this something we advertise? I went, yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. So starting to get people on board by talking about things like market differentiation and how we contact our cohort. So those are my two practical things. Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks very much, Adrian. It's kind of because we sort of work in the trenches every day in open. It's kind of what we do. We wake up in the morning thinking, what are we going to do for open today? And it's an incredible luxury to have, to be able to do that. You know, not everybody has that. But there's this kind of mismatch. When you go to the open education conferences, you're there and you think the problem's been solved. You know, everyone's doing this amazing stuff in open. And then you get back to the trenches, there are only a couple of people that actually know about this stuff. So, I mean, I think the advocacy piece is still a big part of the puzzle. Yeah. Sure.
The other thing as well that I'll put a quick highlight on, and there's a few people in this room who are members, if you are interested in joining the Australasian Open Educational Practice Special Interest Group, there's a mouthful for you, we meet monthly virtually, and we're a national level group that is talking about how we can actually share practice. Very similar. I've taken a lot of my lead from the way in which Wayne runs the OERu in how we actually go about and try and conduct our business. But mostly what we're trying to do at the moment is get examples of practice where things have worked, that across the network we can then take into our own institutions and say, well, look, CSU is doing this. They've made it work. Surely we can do the same. And really we're looking at raising awareness nationally and also doing some advocacy work. So I'd like to point that out to you. And if you're interested in joining up, we'd welcome people from all over the globe if you'd like to join in. Wayne's attended a couple of meetings. So yeah, we're certainly not exclusionary by geography.
I'm very pleased they welcome gate crashes, so it's all good. So Rajiv, can I call on you? I mean, you've done a bunch of stuff in open. It'd be just cool to reflect a bit on your experiences and any lessons learned that would be beneficial to us.
Sure, thanks, Wayne. So I think what Wayne is alluding to is I do a lot of work in advocating for openness globally, and the context is always interesting. I find the language is always different when you're with a research institution, a teaching institution, a community college. The language is different when you're working with a faculty member versus an administrator versus students. And I think part of this is just sort of tailoring to your audience, of course. So in the North American context, the language is often about cost savings and textbooks. For faculty, we often talk about not just the free, but the freedoms and the additional academic freedoms that come with the ability to revise, remix, redistribute content, for example. We're often talking about institutional metrics and the impact on the institution, not just reputationally or in terms of the service mandate of the institution or its strategic objectives, but even in terms of tangible outcomes, whether it's enrollment rates, withdrawal rates, course performance, looking at grade distributions, to try and make the case in as multifaceted, as nuanced a way as possible. But ultimately, I think what's been fascinating is seeing that it is such an interesting heterogeneous movement that people come in for very different reasons, and there will be many who I think who share the motivations that brought you into the movement, which is an easy conversation to have. If it's about social justice, the SDGs, equitable access to education. But for others, they will, for example, many faculty members will come to Open because of the pedagogy. They might come for the cost savings, but they stay for the pedagogy. And so it's interesting to see how I think more and more within the Open Ed movement, people are realizing that we don't have to, with let's say OER, replicate the models that have been built by the commercial textbook industry when open licensing has so many more affordances. So increasingly I'm seeing not just one individual or a group of people from one institution launching a project, but collaborative projects. We're right now in a planning stage of collaborative sprints across 3 different institutions, across 3 different continents to develop ancillary resources for an open textbook, for example, or looking at iterative improvements and refinements across different places. So you often find that you have champions who are the minority within their particular institution, within their particular department, but pairing people together, especially when they speak the same language, let's say the same discipline across institutions, that to me is sort of reflective of the process that we're trying to pursue with the OERu, and the idea that we could go a lot faster individually in some cases, but we can go a lot further in a much more sustainable way if we do things collaboratively. So I think being aware of the heterogeneity in the audience, being mindful of the importance of nuanced arguments, yes, collecting the data at the same time, not just leaving it to true believers, and then looking for those opportunities to really take advantage of the affordances in a collaborative and much more sustainable fashion that doesn't just ask the question of how much does this cost to develop an open textbook or an open courseware? How will this be sustained in terms of its improvements and keeping it up to date over time? But rather, what I hope to talk about tomorrow, which is how can we involve students who are going through the course in the upkeep of the course, while at the same time developing their research skills and their writing skills and so on. So I think those different models will be interesting. I hope that is useful, Wayne.
Very useful, Rajiv. Thanks for sharing the gift of knowledge. I'm not sure if UTAS wants to share some of the stuff that you're doing around the breadth unit thinking, or is it a state secret? But I think there's some interesting stuff there.
Some of you might be aware that the University of Tasmania about 4 years ago now developed, I might just come up here so I can see everybody. The University of Tasmania about 4 years ago developed a series of units that we call breadth units. So breadth units are interdisciplinary. They're taught by 2 or more disciplines or faculties, and they're based on a wicked problem. So rather than teaching discipline, skills and knowledge, it's looking through discipline lenses at a social problem. We created 40 of these breadth units, and then when we sat down to do a bit of a stock take to see what we had, we realised that the units aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we then looked at mapping them against the UN goals, and recently, very recently, it's about to run for the first time next year, we've developed a diploma in sustainability. So that is based on our breadth units, which are linked to the UN goals. So that's pretty exciting. We've made one of those a micro-credential, which is social entrepreneurship in the digital age. And we're currently working to create another 4 to 5 micro-credentials, which are the first 4 weeks of these breadth units. So, yeah, we're really keen to look at exploring how partner institutions might be able to work together to contribute sustainability micro-credentials or courses that might be able to give people the opportunity to do a year of study against the UN goals.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Rachel. Adrian, yes.
Rachel, are the courses that that have been developed, these breadth courses, are they based on OER or on resources that are easily accessible?
Yes, so one of the challenges in looking at converting these units to OERu is around the resources. So even though the brief when it came to developing these units was supposed to be using or contributing to OEP, it didn't kind of work out that way. The teaching teams actually found it really challenging because it was the first time they were working on interdisciplinary units. So yeah, it was quite a challenge as far as breaking discipline norms in assessment design and a different focus, but they are all fully online, which is good. But in looking at creating micro-credentials for OERu, our challenges have been around how open the content is. And also something that we've found recently is even though the units are seeking to address a global issue, a global social issue, and looking at it from a Tasmanian context, sometimes in looking at those units, we haven't necessarily done a great job in I guess what am I trying to say? Yeah, internationalising the curriculum. So yeah, we've just got some things there that we need to look at. So we're going through a bit of a redesign at the moment as far as looking at the content, making the content open, and also making sure that, yeah, it's globalised or internationalised.
Janet, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm keen to hear the challenges that you're facing in Papua New Guinea, because I think your context will be quite unique, and it will be good for us to hear some of the challenges and opportunities that you are faced with.
Yes, coming from Papua New Guinea, it's a developing country. The idea of openness or learning in the open space is still a challenge. And my university has taken the stand that, yeah, we would like to be a leader in the space. But we have contextual challenges like technology and the pedagogy that we're talking about, the pedagogy of the open. People are still in the conventional face-to-face. So you really need to have that going. And I think that's the real challenge. And in my division, I think I like the way someone has mentioned there that you can have a few champions, but I think the way forward is that collaborative space and working towards that understanding. And I think for me, and I have a few people that I have identified and been trying to convince that I think OER is the way forward for us, because we still have limitation in territorial spaces. So yeah, that's just some of it. We'll talk more, and I think I will present some more tomorrow when I speak. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet, and thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. Is anybody else that wants, the chair from Canada in OER wants to say something?
Yeah, we completed a study of 13 implementations of OER. Kwantlen's one of them in our university, Athabasca, in 5 in Canada, 3 in the United States, and 5 in other countries. And when I started, and actually I got into OER in the 1990s, and the reason was we found out that in a collaboration with 7 or 8 universities across Canada, we could not operate with commercial content. It was impossible for us to share what we were doing. And that's the first reason that we started. We sat in a room for a day and a half trying to figure out how to do it. And we found out that our 10 million grant would all go on legal fees if it was commercial content. And so at one point we said, forget it, we'll just open it all to everyone. And so at Athabasca University, we've been pushing it. We have about 28 courses now that are fully open education resources in various types. Nearly all of them are in Moodle. And so it depends on how people can share them. But what it's done is it's saved our university, because we don't charge for textbooks. Our textbooks come in the course fees. So it saved our university, not the students. I know it's at least $1 million, and I estimate it's probably now around $2.5 million. So this is a huge saving for our university. And in the meantime, it's created awareness among our faculty supporting OER, and we're moving forward with it, not as fast as I would like, that's for sure. But to give you one example, our accounting course, 2,400 students a semester, they changed from a book that was $250, and they went to an open access book. And they actually use a partner with a private company that does the testing for them, online testing, and that cost them about $50. So they saved about $200, not the full $250. But it's a very constructive partnership, and it shows, like, with the flexibility of OER, you can do what you want with them. And the professor in that course, we were using a proprietary textbook with online exercises, and the students hated it. It was a horrible textbook. They complained and complained all the time about it, and she wanted to get away from it, and she found an OER textbook and moved to this other provider of testing, which everyone is very, very happy with. And but what I found out going into the study of 13 different implementations is I thought, to me, it was about the ability to just use the material how you want and the cost saving. But I found that most of them were reporting increases in pedagogy, a much better pedagogy, increased knowledge of technology. It helped to promote the use of technology among faculty, increase collaboration among faculty within the institution, as well as outside. So I think there's a lot of evidence growing of the importance of it, and not just cost savings, but other types of savings.
Thanks very much, Wayne. One of the things that I wanted to share with regards to observation is everyone in this room is committed to open education, and we have colleagues, maybe not registrars. I apologize to any registrars on that front, and working with them is interesting. But at least in North America, but also in other jurisdictions, we have collegial governance, but we also have collegial processes, one of which is tenure and promotion.
And one of the biggest barriers to encouraging colleagues with regards to production of open education resources, be they open education textbooks or open textbooks, or developing and delivering an open education micro-credential or course, is, does this count for tenure, promotion, or merit pay? And where you have systems where your standards are developed from the departments, faculties, and schools rather than institutional standards, you run into problems with regards to approval processes. And I'm not just speaking about my own institution, though that is very much a live issue for us, but all across jurisdictions where you have tenure, promotion, and merit awards, is, does this count? And that is a real issue for institutions to actually grapple with. Within my own our own institution, you would have thought that because we actually came from the BC Open University, our standards would have it within them. There is not a single standard across the institution that has recognition of production of open education resources with regards to counting towards tenure and or promotion. Now, I know that's changing, and it's a challenge that I've set down, and the deans can't do it either, because it's the faculty councils that actually approve or recommend to Senate. Now, I can sway Senate till the cows come home, but we are also a faculty-led Senate as well. So I think part of it, and part of our responsibilities, and one of the reasons why I'm so glad that Mike is actually able to join us, is getting the message back to our faculty colleagues about how important this actually is. There is peer review. In British Columbia, we have BC Campus. It is an actual rigorous process by which materials are developed. And I also think it's incumbent upon governments to recognize it. And that is an issue. It's one of the things, and I'm sure Alan can speak for himself, but for Kwantlen, but when we did our presentation to the Standing Select Committee for Finance and Government Services, they do a round robin of going across British Columbia. We actually, and it's in our written submission, we said that at TRU, we support the BC Federation of Students' call for $5 million of funding to be given to BC Campus to help develop open textbooks. Now, if the government does go down that road, that's fantastic. The issue is then going to be changing standards for tenure and promotion so that our colleagues who actually develop these materials are properly recognized. So I think there's an awful lot of passion for it, but sometimes our own faculty-driven and developed systems are a barrier to success.
The rewards and incentives piece in this is very important, but not. I think it's also going to be a slow burn solution, but it's an important one. Yeah.
Oh, just very briefly, I wanted to add, because I think you're right in recognizing the TNP issue. For institutions even outside of British Columbia, it's good to know that the University of British Columbia has led a bit in this space, largely thanks to student advocacy is what actually turned the tide on that. About a year and a half ago, they revised their tenure and promotion policy. So now the creation of open educational resources counts under the educational leadership criterion for tenure and promotion. So anyone's interested, I just tweeted out the link to those revised policies with the OERu 18 hashtag.
Thanks, Rajiv. Rory?
Just on this issue, how it pans out at Athabasca University is we've always given credit for course development, not necessarily OER, but that's always been the criteria for promotion. And do that. So it's always been there. But the problem we're having now is even though you've done no researching, have to do, there's three things: community service, pedagogy, and research. And developing a course does not replace research. And if you develop a course and then you publish a And
Thanks very much, Rory. Adrian.
I completely agree, Rory, that that getting that balance right for academic staff, and one of the things that we've been doing for the last 4 years now is we've been offering what are termed open educational practice staff scholarships. And what these are is it's a competitive funding round within the university where you identify something that is occurring within your course. You present evidence to show that yes, this is a challenge. And you also need to have a basic idea of how openness is going to help you to meet that challenge. And then we fund you, and every month we bring all of those staff scholarship folk together as a community where they share their practice. We always start off with a bit of community time, and then they talk about what is it that is worth celebrating this month, what is it that you've hit which is being a bit of a brick wall, and often you'll find that it's a great meeting for me to chair because I basically just sit in the corner, shut up and let people talk. And it's brilliant because you get that shared practice, that shared knowledge, but then we've also in the last couple of years started to very strongly push in the direction, well, you're doing this work, why aren't you also getting research outcomes from it? And I think that when you start to develop that that scholarship of teaching and learning as well, that's the point where things start to work. And my last point around that scholarship is also, I don't know for my other Australian colleagues here, but certainly at our university, there's a very large push towards publishing in quartile 1 journals, okay, raising the number of publications in those journals and getting the message out that you are able to publish in a quartile 1 journal that is also open. So colleagues in education being able to point them towards places like AJET, which is Askellite's open journal, and ERODL, and being able to show them that the impact scores of both of those journals are top of their field. And so I think that being able to weave in what you are already doing with open is probably one of the best ways to gain traction.
Thanks very much, Adrian. I just want to check if there is anybody who would like to make a strong, passionate contribution around open before we move on.
Just a little unrelated, but because we have both face-to-face and distance learning at our institution, one of the big challenges that I'm faced with is this idea of equivalency. And so a lot of our campus faculty think that, well, I've got this course outline and why don't we deliver this by distance? And they're looking for not just equivalency, but what am I looking for? The word, I've lost the word I'm looking for. Not so much rigor, but it's the fact that, we have the same outcomes, but by distance, we're going to get to those outcomes in a different way. We're not going to follow the same assessments and use the same resources. And that's something is really difficult to get across to people. There's a difference between equivalence and sameness. And, we have in British Columbia, we have a BC transfer guide. And so I always have to point out that this course from that institution that we don't know anything about is deemed equivalent to this course and will transfer. But within the institution, they want to see sameness, right? And that's something we have to get over.
Thanks very much. Okay, I think we can slowly start moving on. One of the points which we, in terms of all the opennesses, the open scholarship, the open pedagogy, the open educational resources, and so forth. One of the things we didn't quite mention, and we will be sure to mention it, is open source. One of the unique features of the OERu is the entire infrastructure that we use to make open online courses available is based on open source software, free and open source software, which means any institution in the world is able to replicate what we do. We in fact publish the recipes, and Dave will chat a little bit about our recipes that we share with the world, with any institution that wants to replicate what we're doing. But the important piece of the open source equation, which very often is forgotten about, is the right of every learner to be able to participate in education without the need to purchase a proprietary software license. And for us, it's mission critical that no learner must ever have to purchase a software license or sacrifice their freedoms or their data to proprietary corporation in order to learn. And which is a key philosophy of what we're doing. And it's part of what we do as well. I mean, we see the world, I won't say differently, but we have an end-to-end process doing this all with open source, which I doubt any of our partner institutions does have. An end-to-end process that's entirely based on open source software. We've learned a bunch of stuff doing that. And we're willing to share it with any organization that wants to leverage those opportunities for components of what they do on campus. And I think around the sustainability, there's a big plus there.
I just wanted to add, Wayne, that I think one of our main roles in this process is not just to walk the talk that we do, but it's also to show that it's possible. So we're trying to demonstrate that there isn't anyone who's really tried this before, I think, and by being able to show that it's possible, it takes away a lot of the sense of risk and liability that many people might perceive.
Okay, so moving on, this part of the session, we'll just run quickly through the history of the OERu. And again, I apologize for those that will have the deja vu experience. There are one or two folk who have been with us on this journey since the very beginning, and a couple of other folk who have been to a couple of meetings. So some of this news will be old news. And so I do apologize for repeating it. But I think it's an important message to get us all on the same page, to see where we've come from and what we've achieved and where we are going over the next couple of years. So there is a history link here. Why am I not seeing it? Am I looking in the wrong place? Ah, there we go, sorry. So the OER Foundation, which is the legal structure that oversees all of this, was established in 2009. And how this comes together, I must acknowledge the vision and leadership of Otago Polytechnic and Phil Kerr. How this came about, I met with Phil Kerr in Vancouver and said, we've got this great idea. We want to build this international collaboration with universities around the world, and we want to give away all the courses for free. Please set up an independent entity to do this. And after a conversation, Phil saw the vision. And it happened. And we needed an independent organization because you folk pay membership fees to the organization. And I think it's more attractive to be able to pay membership fees to an independent organization that is independently audited, that is independently managed, than paying fees into the coffers of another partner or another institution. It just makes that conversation easier. And so the OER Foundation was established. And that's where we started. We then held a concept proposal meeting on the 23rd. Was it the Quake's on the 22nd, right? Yeah. On the 23rd of February, we hosted the very first meeting where the concept of the OERu was proposed. It took place on the 23rd of February, and I was just checking with Dave. The reason I remember this is because it was the day after the Christchurch earthquakes. Yeah, the earth moved, but the challenge with the moving earth was half our participants who had registered couldn't get there because the airport in Christchurch was shut down because of the earthquakes, which is the main hub for flights through to Dunedin. But nonetheless, we had a good number, and that is where we proposed the concept. We got funding from UNESCO to stream the meeting live around the world, And we said, this is what we want to do. We want to assemble open online courses and have partner institutions provide assessment services on a cost recovery basis towards recognized qualifications. And the meeting said, well, actually, this is perhaps a good thing to do. Let's go ahead and do it. And what we decided at that meeting was to introduce the planning framework. You can go into the notes of the meetings, the high level sort of logic model, if you will, of how we were going to go about building this thing, and implement the context, input, process, and product evaluation methodology to help guide us with the implementation of the project, which we have been doing. We have completed the context and the input evaluation of designing this whole collaboration. We will be transitioning into the process evaluation to have a look and see the courses that we've implemented, what are the lessons we can learn from that in terms of moving forward. So moving on, Dave, in November of the same year, we hosted the inaugural meeting of the OERu. Those were the good old days when we were still the OER University, because that was the concept which people thought was a good concept to describe what we were doing. We hosted the meeting in Dunedin as well. We agreed the inaugural qualification that we were going to work with. We were very, very ambitious in those early years, and we had agreed that we were going to establish a Bachelor of Education in General Studies. Now, the reason we chose the Bachelor of General Studies, a BA degree General Studies, was because it's a lot easier to find courses that you can put together to assemble a BA General Studies. So that was the direction that we decided on at that meeting, and we said we would adopt a prototyping model to build a couple of courses on the platforms that we were thinking about so that we can learn through the process to inform future decision making. Moving on, we built a number of prototype courses, and then we convened in Kamloops in 2013 for the second meeting of OERu partners. And that was kind of the official launch of the OERu. We were very privileged to have Sir John Daniel, who many of you would know, who officiated at the event for the inauguration. But now you're most probably wondering about the name university. And this is a bit of interesting history which you may or may not know about. On the eve of the launch of the OER University, we got information that we've been challenged by a number of universities in a country which shall remain nameless for the time being. A number of universities who are funded by New Zealand taxpayer dollars to widen access to public education. And they warned us the eve before going live, we are breaking the law, and it's true, we were. You see, the word university is a reserved concept in the Higher Education Act. But we thought that using the lowercase u, we never used an uppercase U. We were referring to the original meaning of Universitas Magistrorum et Scholarum, a community of scholars. We were still breaking the law. But at any rate, you can't change a name the night before you launch, and so we launched. At that particular meeting, and this is interesting, that is where we first proposed the introduction of micro courses. In other words, assembling each university course from a collection of micro courses, largely to address the challenge of the differences in course size in different parts of the world. Right, so in the US, for example, Northern America and Canada, your courses are the equivalent of 120 notional learning hours for a degree course. In New Zealand, it's 150 notional learning hours. Australia is typically 160 notional learning hours. A UK module is 200 notional learning hours. So already we're beginning to see we've got a bit of a challenge around, well, okay, if we're going to think about international credit transfer, how are we going to make this work? And one way of doing this is by assembling courses as individual micro courses, right? And so now the equation is a little simpler. 3 OERu micro courses is the equivalent of a full course in North America. 4 micro courses, the equivalent of a full course in Australia and New Zealand. 5 for the UK folk that use modules is the equivalent of a full course in most degrees there. But of course, this was laying the foundations for being able to issue and progress stackable micro-credentials. And this is a key point of difference that the OERu has, is that our individual micro courses are mapped to formal academic credit that count towards recognized qualifications. So we're building interesting pathways for stackable micro-credentials, and if learners want to get formal academic credit, they can, because we ironed out all the systems moving forward on that process. We implemented our organizational working group structures. Many of you will be familiar with that, who are working on that. So moving forward, immediately following that meeting, we met up at the Commonwealth of Learning. The Commonwealth of Learning have done a lot of work with the Transnational Credit Transfer Agreement. So working with the member states in the Commonwealth, they had done a lot of thinking around, well, how do you transfer credit for the virtual university of the small states of the Commonwealth? And we spent a lot of time looking at that. We took out of that document, which we thought would work for us, because that was openly licensed, and those formed the foundations for drawing up the articulation guidelines, which we then used to actually develop the credit transfer articulation agreement, which we will have a look at during the meeting. So moving on, at the second partners meeting, there was a lot of talk about, you guys actually don't have a strategic plan, you better start getting your act together, you need a strategic plan. And I think Alan was at that meeting, and you had strongly advised us we better get a strategic plan in place. And so one of the things that was discussed at the inaugural meeting of the Council of OERu, the inaugural meeting of the OERu Council of Chief Executive Officers, was to develop a strategic plan. But at this meeting, the council agreed the terms of reference for that group. We discuss the terms of reference every year. There are representatives for the different regions. The chair of the OERu Council of Chief Executive Officers is Alan Davis from KPU. But at that meeting, we said, you better get a strategic plan. Moving on. We hosted for a number of years to help Creative Commons New Zealand get on their feet, which is the national, in those days, in the past, the affiliate of Creative Commons, which we hosted at the OER Foundation. But since then, Creative Commons head office have changed their structures. They are no longer affiliates. And Creative Commons has now become, Creative Commons New Zealand has now become an independent entity. It's not Creative Commons, Toa Commons Aotearoa, yeah. But they have now an independent organization. Moving on. The third meeting of OERu partners was hosted, you'll be familiar with the backdrop there, in Hobart, by the University of Tasmania. At this meeting, we had a lengthy process where we transparently developed the first strategic plan, 2015 to 2017 for the OERu. We spent a lot of time at that meeting calibrating the KPIs, the key performance indicators for that strategic plan in Hobart. What we also did at Hobart is we tabled the very first draft of the guidelines for credit transfer and articulation across the network. And we tabled because we had already done the context evaluation as part of the SIP model, the context input process product evaluation, where we then discussed plans for the implementation of the input evaluation. And moving on, at the CEO's meeting, we split hosting responsibilities because there was a lot of competition from the Australian partners in terms of who wanted to host. And so we split hosting between UTAS and University of Wollongong, where the CEO's meeting was hosted. So from the partners meeting, the recommendation went forward that the council should approve the plan. The strategic plan was approved by the council. And this was a strategy which we trialed, and it actually worked quite well, was the requirement for institutional action plans. So this was at the stage where we still needed to do a lot of product development. We needed courseware, and we needed courseware to, you know, fit into a credential. Now, I don't want, Rory, I hope you'll, I don't want to pick on anything, but we had a contribution for the interpretation of Albertan law. which I'm sure is extremely valuable to Albertans and people planning to move into Alberta. It's less important for folk in other parts of the world. But Rory's going to kill me later on, but anyway. I just wanted to use that as an example. It is a challenge to find courses and contributions in a way that makes an intelligent pathway of study when you're reliant on donations from institutions that are contributing courses into the kitty. And so, but we've at the point that we actually do have a full product now. But that's why we instituted these institutional action plans. We went out and we went to each partner institution and said, well, what are you going to do for OERu this year? And please let us know when you're going to do it by. And that actually helped a lot in getting us to the point where we're at. I think we need a kind of a different model and strategy now. Given that we do have the first year of study, I think there are other priorities and other opportunities. And I think that's part of the discussion we need to have at this meeting. So moving on. This was a significant milestone, our very first graduate. Now, while the OERu doesn't have hundreds of thousands of graduates, the significance of this is proved that the model works. So what happened here is one of the prototype courses that was developed was the Regional Relations in Asia and Pacific course that was developed by the University of Southern Queensland as OER. The assessments were drawn up and were assessed by University of Southern Queensland. Thomson Rivers successfully transferred credit from the Regional Relations in Asia and the Pacific course to Michelle Aragon's degree at Thomson Rivers University. So this is a significant part of the puzzle where we demonstrated that this is a model that can work. Look, it did work. So that was a big win for us. The learning. We also learned a lot through the process around what the requirements are in order to achieve that. And obviously that learning was plowed back into the development of the articulation agreements. So that was a big win for us. So moving on. In 2015, we held 2 regional consultation meetings to discuss open business model. One in North America. This was the Oceania one. The next slide. One in North America. And we produced an open business model canvas, which we will be looking at tomorrow to see if it needs any refinement now, given the new context. So moving on. 4th meeting of OERu partners held in South Africa in Vanderbijl Park by Northwest University. Another significant milestone for the OERu, we approved the guidelines for credit transfer and credit accumulation. So these were the set of guidelines that we would be using in the network to inform how this process would work, which we actually used to build the articulation agreement. We then also got a tad more realistic, realizing with the capacity that we have, we're not going to be able to do multiple degrees very soon. Let's focus on getting a first year of study done as a minimum viable product. And at that meeting, we nominated the Certificate of Higher Education Business as the first exit award. We have an evergreen strategic planning process. We recalibrate every year. Moving on then. Okay, we expanded the terms of reference for council to include giving advice and support on implementing the OERu. The business model canvas would be distributed to the network, which we did. And again, the endorsement from council, let's focus on this first year of study and get that right. Moving on. We then hosted the 5th meeting of OERu partners in the beautiful Inverness in Scotland, where we discussed planning for the first year of study, again, the implementation, and then we confirmed an additional exit qualification, the Certificate of General Studies at Thomson Rivers University, which would then be added and form part of this whole initiative. Moving on. Yep, so decision to go ahead with the first year of study. And then we at this meeting is where we decided to develop the Learning in a Digital Age course to be designed in a way that could be run as an open boundary course. Now, what an open boundary course basically means is more than one institution teaching that course for their own learners. So again, focusing on trying to maximize reuse of what we're doing within the network, that's where we took that decision. We are nearly there in terms of where we're at now. Moving on. The sixth meeting was held in Toronto, hosted by eCampus Ontario at Ryerson University in Toronto. The planning around the phased launch of the first year of study. I mean, when you're doing this, you've got to figure out, well, how do you phase the launches, which courses you're going to launch and at which time. And here we started grappling with the challenges of marketing. Marketing is not easy, that I've learned. It's a very interesting space because it's very hard to get marketing professionals from different institutions talking about marketing of a shared project, which sometimes is perceived as competing against your own market. So that's an interesting challenge. However, there are partners in this network who have made a very strong contribution in helping us think this through. And I do want to acknowledge Thompson Rivers University. Your marketing people have been astounding in helping us navigate this space. So I just want to say a big, big thank you. And also Thomas Edison State University. I've learned more about marketing, click-through rates and what you've got, the long tail of this and what you've got. It's not straightforward, but we're learning, moving on. The CEO's meeting. Yeah, again, strong support. Let's get this first year operating and get as many students going through this process as possible. We need to get runs on the board. And also to start thinking about, hey, perhaps this network should develop a leadership role in transnational micro-credentialing, just by virtue of what we've got. And some of that is now coming into being. And that, I think, is pretty much where we're at. There might be two more slides. Oh, yes. All right, the soft launch, commensurate with the decisions that we take. We had the soft launch of Learning in a Digital Age earlier this year. We learned a bunch of stuff. I will be reporting in more detail on what happened there during the course of the meeting. And we're on time and we're breaking for tea. Thank you very much. So let's just stop the recording.